The divine wisdom has been handed down through the ages, and from it, as from a great root, have sprung all the religions which have enlightened man. In other words, it is the science of life, the knowledge about God, about the universe, about man and his relative position in the scheme of things. God himself only knows this science in its sublime totality. But the vastness of extent and complexity in detail, even of the fragments we have been privileged to receive, are barred to simple statements. The main outlines of the subject which have been specially brought before Western students may indeed be summed up so shortly that a child might understand them. They may be formulated thus. The fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man are fundamental facts. The law of absolute justice is all-pervading that law, which ordains that every thought we think, every word we speak, every action we perform, shall have its inevitable consequence for good or for evil, for happiness or for misery, to ourselves and to others, in ever-widening circles. This law has been operative through untold ages, and that our very existence here is in consequence of its action. Our earthly pilgrimage was not begun at birth, and will not be ended at death. While desire of life remains, we must inevitably return to incarnation in order to work out the effects of our past thoughts, our past words, and our past actions. While the fresh causes we generate at every moment will in their turn produce effects which will have to be worked out through future lives. Finally, the great law of sacrifice, that law which has been more or less travestied by every religion in turn, is, when rightly understood, the final explanation of the deepest mysteries of being, and the crown of our most sublime attainment. When we come to work these out in further detail, and, still more, if any reference has to be made to our past history, and the long process of evolution which has made us what we are, the subject becomes one which cannot easily be grasped by every superficial reader. The problem cannot be formulated in simple language. While attempting to put before the public as clear and plain a statement as possible, the main object in this writer's mind will be to
Everyone, thank you for joining us. This is an historic occasion. We are here to view the highest resolution image of the infrared universe anyone has ever seen, captured by the most powerful telescope anyone has ever made. Madam Vice President, we particularly appreciate your leadership of the National Space Council and your commitment to ensuring innovation in space. The floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I am very honored to be with you all. President Joe Biden and I talk often about our mutual passion for everything you all do. This is a very exciting moment to join you for the unveiling of the work that you have been laboring on for decades. So yes, as chair of the National Space Council, I know that today represents an exciting new chapter in the exploration of our universe. From the beginning of history, humans have looked up to the night sky with wonder. When NASA launched the Hubble Space Telescope in 1990, we were able to see the stars unobstructed by the Earth's atmosphere and understand the universe in ways we could have never imagined even a few decades earlier. And now we enter a new phase of scientific discovery. Building on the legacy of Hubble, the James Webb Space Telescope allows us to see deeper into space than ever before and in stunning clarity. It will enhance what we know about the origins of our universe, our solar system, and possibly life itself. And the images we will see today are a testament to the amazing work done by the thousands of workers across our nation who dedicated years to this project. They embarked on this complex endeavor for the benefit of humankind and will undoubtedly inspire generations to look to the heavens with excitement and ambition. With that, it is my great honor to introduce a leader who has always believed in the power of American innovation and international cooperation to achieve the remarkable. our president, the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Thank you, Vice President Harris, Chair of the National Space Council. And thank you, my dear friend and our outstanding NASA administrator, and the only guy here that's been in space, Bill Nelson. 6.5 months ago, a rocket launched from Earth, carrying the world's newest, most powerful deep space telescope on a journey 1 million miles into the cosmos. First of all, that blows my mind. 1 million miles into the cosmos. It's a new window into the history of our universe. And today we're going to get a glimpse of the first light to shine through that window. Light from other worlds, orbiting stars, far beyond our own. It's astounding to me when I read this. Light where stars were born and from where they die. Light from the oldest galaxies, the oldest documented light in the history of the universe, from over 13 billion, let me say that again, 13 billion years ago. It's hard to even fathom. When this image is shared with the world, it'll be a historic moment for science and technology, for astronomy and space exploration, for America and all of humanity. These images are going to remind the world that America can do big things. And they remind the American people, especially our children, that there's nothing beyond our capacity, nothing beyond our capacity. We can see possibilities no one has ever seen before. We can go places no one has ever gone before. And now let's take a look at the very first image from this miraculous telescope. NASA Administrator Nelson, I'm going to turn this over to you. So will you please tell us about what we're seeing?
Mr. President, if you held a grain of sand on the tip of your finger at arm's length, that is the part of the universe that you're seeing, just one little speck of the universe. And what you're seeing there are galaxies. You're seeing galaxies that are shining around other galaxies whose light has been bent. And you're seeing just a small little portion of the universe. You know, 100 years ago, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, 100 years ago, we thought there was only one galaxy. Now, the number is unlimited. And we're getting our first glimpse, as you said, Mr. President, we're looking back more than 13 billion years. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. And that light that you are seeing on one of those little specks has been traveling for over 13 billion years. And by the way, we're going back further because this is just the first image. They're going back about 13.5 billion years. And since we know the universe is 13.8 billion years old, we're going back almost to the beginning. That is the discovery that we are making with this. There's another thing that you're going to find with this telescope. It is going to be so precise, you're going to see whether or not planets, because of the chemical composition that we can determine with this telescope of their atmosphere, if those planets are habitable. Whoa. Yeah. This is what's happening. And in our galaxy, we have billions of stars or suns, and there are billions of galaxies with billions of stars and suns. And when you look at something as big as this is, we are going to be able to answer questions that we don't even know what the questions are yet.
It's amazing. I wonder what the press like in all those other places.
We're going to give time for the press to leave, and then we'll continue the briefing.
it's amazing to listen to this. I think I keep up with the news, but obviously I don't keep up with it enough. We get so wrapped up in, little bitty fights or even big fights occurring in government and other fields that we miss the big picture. And you're really firing my imagination. And I'm old. I can only imagine what you're doing with the young people. I'm fascinated by what you've told me about DART, D-A-R-T.
D-A-R-T is the acronym.
Well, that's amazing because so many people bring this up. What's going to happen when the asteroid hits or the meteor tears Earth apart? How universal is our vision of the universe? Will we be able to see something coming, even a smaller asteroid before it hits, or is it only going to work with a large one?
The answer is yes. We can see small, we can see large. It would only take an asteroid the size of a football field in diameter, and you're talking about major damage to planet Earth. The force of that after it goes through the Earth's atmosphere, and if it's still the size of a football field hitting the planet, you're talking about a major disaster. Larry, before we leave, I hadn't even talked about the search for extraterrestrial life. What do you think what do you think we're doing on Mars? What do you think we're looking for life? This is a part of NASA's mission. That's what this telescope is going to be looking for. Are there other planets elsewhere that there is life? Now, I know what you've seen is what those Navy pilots saw in 2004, and there have been some 300 sightings since then. And I've talked to those pilots, and they know they saw something, and their radar's locked onto it. And then all of a sudden it was here on the surface, and then it's there. And they don't know what it is, and we don't know what it is. We hope it's not an adversary here on Earth that has that kind of technology. But it's something. And so this is a mission that we're constantly looking. Who is out there? Who are we? How did we get here? How did we become as we are? How did we develop? How did we civilize? And are those same conditions out there in a universe that has billions of other suns in billions of other galaxies? It's so large, I can't conceive it.
You anticipated one of the questions that I have here because it was suggested to me by many different people. They did want your comment on what you think the fighter pilots saw. I think most people saw that 60 Minutes piece, and there were a lot of newspaper pieces about whether or not it was Russia or China, or perhaps more likely, some extraterrestrial intelligent beings. What is your theory? You've heard a lot of options. Which one do you think is the most credible, if you can choose?
Larry, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know this, that my personal opinion is that the universe is so big, and now there are even theories there might be other universes. And if that's the case, who am I to say that planet Earth is the only location of a life form that is civilized and organized like ours? But I'll tell you what that makes me think. I better be a better steward of what we have, because we're messing it up. And we're messing it up just the way we're treating each other. And so I know what my mission is: to be a better steward of this planet and be a better citizen of planet Earth. But are there other planet Earths out there? I certainly think so, because the universe is so big.
And of course, Einstein believed in parallel universes. So that's good enough for me if Einstein believed in it. And he inspired a lot of Rod Serling's Twilight Zones. So it is amazing when you think about it and what may be there that we can discover. And of course, we always want America to be at the forefront. That's what you're doing. This has been so inspiring. I think for everybody who is watching and listening, it certainly has been inspiring for me.
Science. Systematic knowledge of the physical or material world gained through observation and experimentation. Astronomy is rightfully recognized as the oldest science, almost to the point of being the literal definition. It was through the practice of astronomical observations that led to either the discovery or the development of mathematics, physics, the measurement of time, agriculture, and almost, if not every other conceivable accomplishment that we've made. For hundreds of thousands of years, our relationship with the cosmos has been the most vital and influential component in both the progressive development of humanity as well as the foundation of what it's meant to be a human being. Gradually, yet dramatically, however, over the course of the last 100 years, which is just a pitiful and minuscule blip on the overall timeline of the history of humanity, and even more so in the universe in which we exist, mankind has become an inverted and introverted society, solely responsible for, yet seemingly collectively unaware of the veil that we've draped over planet Earth, and by extension, all of its inhabitants, including ourselves. We as a species appear to be completely blind to the fact that we've blinded ourselves. We, as a society, as a species, and as a planet, have largely excised the beauty, the danger, the potential, and in some ways even the very reality of the existence of the cosmic wonder from our consciousness and even experience. Through urbanization, industrialization, and globalization, the so-called comforts and standards of modern living, mainly the overlooked and unknown effects of light pollution, which on the surface present themselves as luxuries rather than compromises, have seemingly swooped in and completely rewritten hundreds of thousands of years of deep-rooted human history, evolution, programming, and instinct, and it's done so in little more than just a single human lifetime. An unadulterated view of the night sky isn't catastrophic though, right? Fundamentally, it's not much different than just a cloudy night. The sun and the moon are still there doing what they're supposed to. I can still see the stars from my backyard and even Venus on a clear night. And although stargazing is admittedly a guilty pleasure of mine, I'd hardly go as far as saying that my view of the night sky being slightly dimmed or diffused could really have an effect on me, positive or negative. Besides, how big of a difference can light pollution really make? Once you realize what the night sky without the effects of light pollution really looks like, you'll begin to understand how and why it's been the most influential aspect of human life for all but the last 100 years, and how we've truly been robbed. Most of us have never truly experienced what I feel we are all deeply mourning the loss of without even knowing it. Having both literally and figuratively lost sight of the so-called heavens that we, for some unknown reason, godly or otherwise, find ourselves residing, we too often forget that it's not us as individuals or even as a species that is at the center of the universe, but that our entire planet, solar system, and galaxy is nothing more than a speck in something so inconceivably massive, ancient, and complex that we as human beings will more than likely never be able to fully comprehend or understand it. Not only has its eternal presence been all but airbrushed out of our realities, as well as all of the motivation, ambition, and inspiration that comes with that, but for the first time in human history, We're largely completely ignorant to the literal universe which swirls around us as we ourselves swirl around a giant ball of plasma and simultaneously tumble through whatever the hell all of this is and whatever the hell it all means. For the entire time that we've inhabited this planet, this has been our main quest, to understand what all of this means, to understand how it works, to understand why we're here, what we're doing, and where we're going. And that quest has been fueled by the astonishment of the astronomical world, as you can see why. It's through the pursuit of these curiosities that the very consciousness and intelligence required to both ask and answer them have been developed. It is in our desire to understand the cosmos that we begin to understand ourselves and everything else around us. As a result, that veil that we've draped over the planet might as well be directly over our eyes, as we as a species have both metaphorically and literally shut ourselves in and drawn the curtains on our planet. If you didn't know that the moon had a cycle, would you even realize it? Surely you'd realize that it regularly appears different, but would you recognize the pattern? Do you know the effects that the moon has on Earth and the things living on it? More than likely, no. I've been in love with the moon for my entire life, and I make a point to look at it every night. And I'm willing to admit that up until recently I didn't fully understand these things. It's easy to think that the moon is nothing more than an aesthetically appealing decoration which has no effects on us. Yet the moon influences and impacts the Earth's oceanic tides, magnetic field, orbit, rotation, and gravity, just to name a few. Its cycles have been both said and proven to be responsible for many different patterns here on Earth, as well as the life forms which inhabit it. Wolves are famously known to howl at the moon. Curiously, many ocean animals are influenced by the moon as well, with the most intriguing being the elusive giant squid, which lives exclusively in the darkness of the bottom of the ocean, yet instinctively travels to the surface to feed. But only during full moons. On the other end of the spectrum, it would only take 8.5 minutes for the Earth to be plunged into complete darkness and chaos following the sudden disappearance of our sun. Life here on Earth, in the best case scenario, would desperately crawl along for a maximum of a few months before finally collapsing. We, as modern-day humans, are often completely ignorant to the circumstances around us until they're negatively affecting us, and until then, we take them for granted. Most of us are too preoccupied looking down at our devices to gaze up at the stars anyway, since most of us have lived our entire lives without any notable exploration of or threats from outer space. It hasn't really been able to capture our fleeting and depleted attention spans for much longer than the runtime of a sci-fi flick. And with no reference to go off of, it's not too far-fetched to theorize that many of us would probably mistake the undiluted night sky for some sort of augmented reality, photoshopping, or Instagram filter, rather than the ethereal force that it is in reality.
You might catch yourself sliding in and out of a hallucinatory state after it's all over. You do, just relax and enjoy it.
Akhenaten, a true individual, the most remarkable of all pharaohs, the first prophet.
People were afraid to discuss it. You know, it's shocking. It was not being reported up the chain of command. The Secretary of Defense didn't know. It wasn't a matter of concealing the information. It was a matter of hear no evil, see no evil.
What's your favorite scary movie?
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, which says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Try getting a note and aquarium. You'll see that you have a treasure.
On March 27th, 2022, the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, California hosted the 94th Annual Academy Awards, which featured what is arguably one of the most memorable pop culture moments in recent history.
What a night! Everybody, no one's wearing a mask. Just breathing raw dog tonight. Wow! Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? that was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Uh-oh, Richard. Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Keep my name out your fucking mouth.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
It was a G.I. Jane joke.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth.
I'm going to, okay? Okay. That was the greatest night in the history of television. Okay.
The reaction that this received over the following few days was one that could be expected, at least on social media anyway. What I found to be interesting though was the attention that this received from the news media. And when I say news media, I'm not referring to the predictable entertainment and gossip platforms like TMZ or E! News or Entertainment Tonight, because that's exactly where this should have been covered. This was headline news everywhere you looked though. The Associated Press, BBC, Rutgers, and NPR, which are 4 of my top 5 most serious, reliable, and straightforward news sources. CNBC, The Wall Street Journal, and Forbes magazine, all of which are self-described business and finance outlets. And even PolitiFact, CNET, and IGN had articles about this. Yes, PolitiFact, the fact-checking website, CNET, the technology and electronics website, and IGN, which is dedicated to video games. Now, I'm not saying that this wasn't newsworthy. What I want to highlight here, though, is how this story completely dominated the public conversation to a degree and for a length of time that I hadn't seen in quite a while. That same night, at this same event, a 2021 Netflix film was nominated for 4 awards, one of them being Best Picture, which is the most prestigious Oscar award a film can receive.
This is not real. This is not real. This is not real. This isn't happening. Kate, tell me this isn't really happening.
Don't Look Up is an absolutely star-studded film featuring everybody from Leonardo DiCaprio, Jonah Hill, Tyler Perry, and Kid Cudi to Ariana Grande.
You guys discovered a comet? I have a tattoo of a shooting star on my back.
Oh, that's terrific.
I mean, it even has Meryl Streep as the fucking president of the United States.
I hear there's something you don't like the looks of. We discovered a very large comet.
Oh, good for you. It's headed directly towards Earth.
This comet is what we call a planet killer.
It's a satirical social commentary film about how us as modern-day humans would react to the news of an extinction-level asteroid hurtling towards Earth, and how society would react to it. Taking corruption,
What if we're rich? That would be terrible!
social media,
It's real and it's coming.
and celebrity-obsessed culture into consideration.
You hear that girl from Live TV said we're all gonna die? No.
It's widely speculated that the asteroid in this film was supposed to represent our looming climate change disaster. However, I think it's a better analogy and commentary on the pandemic. Regardless, I remember that this was my first reaction to this Will Smith and Chris Rock dilemma. The irony of this completely consuming the world for the following days and weeks. Meanwhile, Don't Look Up didn't win a single one of the 4 awards it was nominated for. I think that this perfectly demonstrates what I'm trying to articulate. The cosmic world dramatically and undoubtedly alters every single aspect of our life, existence, and survival, not only for us, but for every living entity on the planet, and we are currently completely disconnected from it. Both literally and figuratively closer to the metaverse than we are the universe. The possibility of an asteroid like the one that wiped out the dinosaurs barreling towards Earth, and the reality of the realization that we realistically couldn't do anything about it, is something that doesn't seem real to a lot of us, myself included. And it's arguably a scenario that 2 years ago would have been considered equal to a global pandemic in terms of probability and seriousness to most people. And we all know how that played out.
You'll never take me alive!
This is understandable to a certain degree. It's not something we've ever been seriously confronted with, and without the constant visual reminder of how much activity is really going on above our heads on a regular basis, it's a threat that most people just don't bother themselves with considering.
All day! And we're live. Gentlemen, here we go again. What's happening?
Back in the room.
A pleasure to see you guys, as always. This is one of my favorite podcasts that we ever do. And this is very timely because, first of all, the big New York Times article about the possibility of a comet hitting Los Angeles, the preparations for what they would do if a comet hit Los Angeles, and the comet known as Donald Trump that's hit the United States. And
he's even got the hair.
It's just the whole thing is, I mean, if the end of the world was coming, boy, it's all on the wall. You know, the writing's all there. It's kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. So what's the latest and the greatest?
Well, the latest and the greatest is this really important comet research that's going on, which is just changing our whole view of history and prehistory and of the future of humanity. That it would be good to make a film about this and crowdfund it. I actually mentioned that to the scientists, and they said what we really need is more funding for our research.
And so what are they trying to put together?
Well, they're wanting to... You see, the thing is, these guys have actually not had any official funding. This is a group of major, highly credentialed scientists who, for the last decade, have been investigating the extraordinary story of a massive series of comet impacts on the North American ice cap 12,800 years ago. That is the global cataclysm that wipes out a whole civilization from prehistory. So that's why it's of interest to me. They're not coming at it from that point of view. They're coming at it from rediscovering something that we've lost about ourselves. Something that's really important to understand the role of cataclysms in the story of the Earth. And to, frankly, put down the opposition, because there's been so much opposition to this idea from people with vested interest in other theories as well.
It is a very unusual thing, the fact that we know that comets and all sorts of various large objects have impacted the Earth. We see the craters, we know they exist, but it's so rarely discussed. It's so strange. If it wasn't for this article in the New York Times, I can't remember when the last time it even came up. And it's such a huge issue.
It's a massive issue. The point is that catastrophes are the untold story of our past.
We were given a little hint of it. February of 2013, Chelyabinsk, Siberia. Remember the event?
Yeah.
Now that was just a little cosmic speck. Came in, it was about 50 feet in diameter, which is about, so it came in, I think it exploded 12 miles, about 20 kilometers up in the atmosphere, but it was still enough to damage thousands of buildings and injure 1,500 people. Now the thing about that one is if it had been slightly larger, if it had come in at a slightly steeper angle, a little bit higher velocity, you could have had thousands of fatalities rather than just injuries. And that would have been major headline news at that point. As it was, it's already forgotten.
People don't like to talk about cataclysms and catastrophes, and actually nor do I. Nobody wants a horrible cataclysm to occur, but this is the point, which is that the prospect of a comet or asteroid cataclysm on the Earth is actually much higher than has been told to us up till now, and something can be done about it. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. We don't have to, say, okay, it's all over, forget about it. Quite the contrary. This is just something that would be prudent and rational for the human species to do. And amongst many other imprudent and irrational things that we focus on instead, we should be focusing on a bit on this.
Well, at least just to heighten awareness of it, and also the possibility that we've been nailed a bunch of times and we've forgotten about it. And this is the big thing that you've been dealing with your entire career. Yeah. This skepticism about past civilizations. I mean,
the existing model, and when new evidence comes in which can't be explained by the existing model, they just try to explain away the new evidence and not think maybe it's time to change our theory. This is the unfortunate thing. But cataclysms, a global cataclysm, the massive event that happened 12,800 years ago, the Younger Dryas impacts, which were a series of comet impacts on the North American ice cap. This accounts for why we don't have a lot of evidence, hard evidence of a 12,000 plus year old civilization, because it went down in that catastrophe. It was wiped out. 96.
So this is, to me, this is something that I've looked at because of you guys in great depth. When I read your book, I was just completely enthralled with this idea of history having some sort of a rise and fall, and civilization having these resets. So I've been absorbed in it for a long time. But what's fascinating to me is people that consider themselves to be skeptical, but many people who question anything that's outside of what they've been told. As soon as they hear any sort of a theory outside of what they've been told, they immediately call quackery.
Absolutely.
But it's a weird knee-jerk reaction to something, especially when you talk about asteroids, that is a very real part of our past. Yeah. We have a ton of evidence. I mean, there's actual craters that you can look at on Earth. The moon, which has no atmosphere, is littered with them. And if we look at the moon as a model for what could possibly have happened to Earth, or at least, some of them, obviously with the moon having no atmosphere, it's going to get hit a lot more than we are.
Sure.
But still, this is a very real situation that this solar system, at least as far as we know, the only solar system has to deal with this. But we know this is a real issue. I mean, we've seen impacts.
Well, it's like you just said. On the one hand, you have Earth scientists looking at the Earth, and what they're realizing is that the Earth is pockmarked with scars, and each of these scars represents a tremendously powerful catastrophe that has happened in the history of the Earth. Now, that's accepted by mainstream science, that major catastrophes have happened in the history of the Earth. But where this thing now is about to come full circle is the recognition that these kinds of catastrophes have also influenced the rise and fall of civilization, and a lot more extremely than has been recognized up to this point. And while geologists and earth scientists are looking at the surface of the Earth and realizing that etched into the surface of the Earth, or imprinted into the surface of the Earth, are hundreds of scars, of which undoubtedly are only a small percentage of the total that exist. At the same time, astronomers are looking out into near-Earth space and discovering that we cohabit space with a lot of stuff. It's not as empty as we thought.
We have time, if we're prepared to be rational and reasonable as a civilization, to take care of this issue.
Now we understand that there was something cosmic that happened. It's left its imprint in the landscape over, 4 continents, 5 continents now?
Yeah, over 50 million square kilometers of the Earth's surface. Just a giant debris field there's stuff that is only produced by massive impacts. These things come in at 70,000 miles an hour, and if they have any diameter at all, if they're 100 meters or more in diameter, they are going to hit the Earth really hard. They're not going to burn up in the atmosphere, and when they do, they pack a huge amount of kinetic energy, a huge amount of heat and shock, and that creates very definite chemical products, so nanodiamonds, so carbon spherules, so melt glass, that's like the trinitite that was produced in nuclear explosions. All of these, when they're all found together in the same layer of soil, and when you can put a date on that layer of soil, and when it's all over the world, there's only one thing can explain them: a massive cosmic impact.
I don't understand why this is controversial.
On the morning of June 30th, 1908, a 200-foot wide meteor traveling 60,000 miles per hour entered the Earth's atmosphere. Luckily for us, it burnt up and exploded a few miles above an uninhabited forest. Yet it still managed to destroy 83 square miles of Russian wilderness, flattening over 80 million trees. Had it come just a few hours earlier or later, it would have completely decimated the cities of Jacksonville, Houston, Phoenix, Los Angeles, Nashville, New York, Indianapolis, New Orleans, Louisville, Chicago, Columbus, and Moscow, all of which are smaller than the impact crater created by the explosion. Mind you, this didn't even make contact with the Earth's surface. Had it, even in the same uninhabited area that it did, it would have triggered catastrophic earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, mass extinctions, and a new ice age. Without doing so, it both darkened the daytime skies and lit up the night in Asia, Europe, Sweden, and Scotland. It measured as a 6.0 earthquake on the Richter scale and packed a punch equivalent to 800 Hiroshima nuclear bombs. It's speculated that the comet responsible may have come from the Taurid meteor shower, a debris field from Earth's collision with yet another massive comet 30,000 years ago, which our planet annually passes through and spends 3 months doing so, essentially playing a cosmic game of Frogger. Luckily for humanity and the planet Earth, the gravitational pull of our big brother Jupiter protects us by drawing in most of the objects that travel through our solar system.
Astronomers have witnessed 5 massive explosions on the planet Jupiter as fragments from the Shoemaker Levy collided with the planet. Larger explosions are expected later this week.
Chicken Little was mistaken, but as Shoemaker Levy 9 hitting Jupiter reminds us, there really are these objects in the sky, and they really do hit worlds.
More often than not, though, and now more so than ever, it's far more than just rocks flying around above our heads.
In night vision video from a Navy destroyer, a mysterious flying triangle above the deck of the ship, the Pentagon confirming the images were taken by Navy personnel, expected to be a part of a report on unidentified aerial phenomenon to be presented to Congress this summer. But some of the objects go beyond just flying in the sky. One shows a spherical object dipping into the ocean, similar to an incident in Puerto Rico where an object was tracked buzzing an airport, then flying into the water, popping back out before appearing to split into two and disappearing. Over the last several weeks, some of the nation's top former intelligence officials have been raising eyebrows.
Look at that thing. It's rotating.
Former CIA Director R. James Woolsey said he knew of a case where a plane was paused in midair. Ex-CIA Director John Brennan said it was arrogant to believe there are no other forms of life other than the ones on Earth. And former intelligence chief John Ratcliffe says officials have been tracking technology beyond our capabilities. Like another incident off the coast of California in 2004 when a fighter squadron encountered an object that seemed to defy gravity. Video from that encounter and 2 other incidents were officially released by the Pentagon last year. Now new signs that the Pentagon could declassify more sightings of what they can't explain.
And guys, now here's the thing about those last 3 F-18 videos. I recently asked the former director of the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program at the Pentagon, point blank, are those the only videos that the government has? He said no, those were probably the least compelling videos. And in some videos, you see an object about 50 feet away from the cockpit. Guys.
June 13th. A midsummer afternoon in the small farming town of Bikibo suddenly exploded. Fire, ash, and 2 tons of some bizarre aluminum metal shavings rained down from the now blackened sky as the ground shook, windows were blown out, horses were knocked off their feet, and trees were shredded and entangled with bizarre wires. as an unrecognizable electronical equipment was scattered over 4 square kilometers of rural Sweden. At the center of all of it was a smoldering crater in the ground, 5 miles wide, 2.5 miles deep. The locals explored the surreal scene and collected souvenirs while an unfamiliar hearse with a white coffin in the back ominously roamed around their town. This was the third unidentifiable flying machine to crash in Sweden within the last 6 months. On August 22, 1943, a small pilotless aircraft crashed onto the island of Bornholm, which is 65 miles off the coast of Sweden in the Baltic Sea. 85 days later, on November 15th, the remains of another strange craft were discovered in Borstorp, Sweden. The Swedish military didn't know what to make of these odd crashes at first. It was unlike anything that they had ever seen before. This was at the height of World War II, and up until this point, Sweden had remained neutral. It was becoming more apparent that the tides were slowly turning in the favor of the Allied powers over the Nazis, however, and with only 100 or so miles separating Sweden from Germany, the Swedes decided to approach the British for help. This would be the beginning of Project Big Ben, which was a collaborative effort to reconstruct and reverse engineer these mysterious flying objects. By September, they would get their answers though, as the Nazis began raining down the world's first long-range, self-guided ballistic missiles onto the streets of London. Unbeknownst to the rest of the world until then, almost a year earlier, on October 3rd of 1942, humanity accomplished what is arguably its greatest technological achievement. When the world's first liquid-propelled rocket, a German V-2, lifted off from Test Stand 8 and traveled 108 miles above. When the world's first liquid-propelled rocket, a German V-2, lifted off from Test Stand 8 and traveled 108 miles above Piemont, Germany, at 3,600 miles an hour, exceeding the speed of sound and passing through the Kármán line, becoming the first man-made object in history. Its designer, Wernher von Braun, would celebrate in a speech to his team by saying, "We have led our generation to the threshold of space. The world to the stars is now open. The following points may be deemed as of decisive significance in the history of technology. The following points may be deemed of decisive significance in the history of technology. We have invaded space with our rocket, and for the first time, mark this well, we have used space as a bridge between 2 points on the Earth. We have proven rocket propulsion practical for space travel. To land, sea, and air may now be added infinite empty space as an area of future intercontinental traffic." There was just one problem with that, though. That wasn't the goal. Not the goal of his boss, Adolf Hitler, anyway. Wernher von Braun arrested by the Gestapo, which was Hitler's secret police, for treason and sabotage. When Walter Domberger, von Braun's colleague, was informed of the arrest by the commander of Nazi Germany's armed forces, William Keitel, Domberger was appalled. Von Braun had dedicated almost 2 decades of tireless devotion to the development of the V-2 rocket. "The charges are so serious," Keitel informed him, "the charges are so serious that arrest was bound to follow. The man is likely to lose his life. How someone in his position can indulge in such passes my understanding. Sir, I don't know what the charges are, but I vouch for von Braun." "You'll vouch for him with your own life? You've made up your mind very quickly." "You'll vouch for him with your own life? You've made up your mind very quickly." "It surely goes without saying, sir, that I stand by my closest colleague without hesitation or reservation." "Do you know that your closest colleague has stated in company that it has never been his intention to make a weapon of war out of the rocket? Do you know that your closest colleague has stated in company that it has never been his intention to make a weapon of war out of the rocket? That he had worked under pressure, much like yourself, in the whole business of development only in order to obtain money for his experiments and the confirmation of his theories? That his object all along has been space travel? Nevertheless, I still vouch for him. I have often said myself Nevertheless, I still vouch for him. I have often said myself in introducing a demonstration that our work is only the first tentative step into a new age of technology, that of the rocket. How often have I insisted that the time is now ripe for... Nevertheless, I still vouch for him. I have often said myself in introducing a demonstration that our work is only the first tentative step into a new age of technology, that of the rocket. How often have I insisted that this time is now ripe for this turning... How often have I insisted that the time is now ripe for this turning point in human history? We have shown the way to space travel. We have provided proof of its possibility. If von Braun has committed sabotage by repeating such phrases, I ought to be arrested too. The sabotage is seen in the fact that this man has been giving all of his innermost thought to space travel, and consequently has not applied his whole energy and ability to the production of a weapon of war. With the Soviets practically eliminated as a UFO source, the idea of interplanetary spaceships was becoming more popular. During 1948, the people on ATIC were openly discussing the possibility of interplanetary visitors without others tapping their heads and looking smug. The apparent lack of interest in UFO reports by the press was not a true indication of the situation. I later found out from talking to writers that all during 1948 the interest in UFOs was running high. The Air Force press desk in the Pentagon was continually being asked what progress was being made in the UFO investigation. The answer was, give us time, this job can't be done in a week. The press respected this and was giving them time, but every writer worth his salt had contacts, and these contacts were talking. All during 1948, contacts in the Pentagon were telling how UFO reports were rolling in at the rate of several per day, and how ATIC UFO investigation teams were flying out of Dayton to investigate them. They were telling how another Air Force investigative organization had been called in to lighten ATIC's load. The writers' contacts in the airline industry told about the UFO talk from VPs down to ramp boys. Dozens of good, solid, reliable, experienced airline pilots were seeing UFOs. All of this led to one conclusion. Whatever the Air Force had to say when it was ready to talk would be newsworthy. But the Air Force wasn't ready to talk. The Air Force may not have been ready to talk, but the press was. Specifically Ken Purdy of True magazine. Being left to his own devices, he and his team had started to dig around the historical archives for contextual information, and as a result, some incredible questions and implications were starting to surface. The deeper they researched, the more the surreal realization set in that not only were more and more intriguing events transpiring behind the scenes and more often, but reports of sightings and engagements with UFOs were scattered all throughout human history. Ken was overwhelmed and needed a fresh perspective to help him make sense of it all, so he reached out to an old friend of his via Telegram. Have been investigating flying saucer mystery. First tip hinted at gigantic hoax to cover up official secret. Believe it may have been planted to hide real answer. Looks like a terrific story. Can you take over Washington end? The telegram was to Donald Kehoe, who had been making a name for himself as an aviation writer after being discharged from the Navy due to a shoulder injury. As a military pilot, he had been skeptical of all the buzz surrounding UFOs in the past few years, but the reports from credible Air Force and airline pilots were stacking up. He had heard that the Air Force currently had orders out for pilots to pursue impossibly fast-moving saucers, and he had even heard the rumors about the National Guard pilot being killed doing just that a little over a year ago. The silence and secrecy being displayed by the Air Force regarding the issue hadn't gone unnoticed by him, and now he was being asked to properly investigate his growing curiosity. So the next day, he was in Ken's office having a conversation that would change his life forever. Ken told him, "Me and my team have been on this for months. Now these are competent men. The deeper we dive, the tougher it gets. The more I learn about flying saucers, the less I know." He wanted Donald to get to the bottom of the death of that National Guard pilot, Thomas Mantle. Before he was killed, he described the thing that he was chasing to Godman Tower. We know that much, but they've never released the transcript. For 6 months, we worked to solve the mystery of the discs. We checked 100 sighting reports. Old records gave us fantastic leads. So did Air Force plans for exploring space. Rocket experts, astronomers, Air Force officials, pilots, they all gave us clues pointing to one startling solution. Many intelligent people believed that the saucers contained intelligent spies from another planet. The incredible conclusions of Donald's investigation were published in the 1950 edition of True magazine with the headline, "This is the most interesting and the most important story we have ever published, and it is utterly true. We can document every occurrence reported here. It is our sober, considered conviction that the conclusion arrived at this story is a fact. The flying saucers are real." After 8 months of intensive investigation, the following conclusions have been reached by True magazine. 1. For the past 17 years, the planet Earth has been under systematic close-range examination by living, intelligent observers from another planet. 2. The intensity of this observation and the frequency of the visits to Earth's atmosphere by which it is being conducted have increased markedly during the past 2 years. 3. The vehicles used for this observation and for interplanetary transport by explorers have been identified and categorized as followed. Type 1, a small non-pilot carrying disc-shaped aircraft equipped with some form of television or impulse transmitter. Type 2, a very large metallic disc-shaped aircraft operating on the helicopter principle. Type 3, a dirigible wingless aircraft which in the Earth's atmosphere operates in conformance with the Prandtl theory of lift. The discernible pattern of observation and exploration shown by the so-called flying disc bears in no important particular from well-developed American plans for the exploration of space expected to come to fruition within the next 50 years. There is reason to believe, however, that some other race of thinking beings is a matter of 2¼ centuries ahead of us. The only other possible explanation is that the saucers are extremely high-speed, long-range devices developed here on Earth. Such an advance, which the Air Force has convincingly denied, would require an almost incredible leap in technical progress even for American scientists and designers. Before publication, Donald Keyhole had informed the Air Force of these findings and his intentions to go public with them. They made no attempts to prevent him from doing so. What they obviously didn't expect, though, is that this would go on to be the most widely distributed and discussed article in magazine history. Immediately after, the Air Force was flooded with inquiries from the press and the public, to which they immediately discredited the article and everything in it, releasing a public statement that all flying saucers, even those made by its own pilots and high-ranking officials, were simply mistakes caused by hysteria. The damage was already done, though, and 3 days later the Air Force would backtrack on this statement. Instead of revising their stance publicly, they'd choose instead to quietly declassify a Project Sign document on the issue which said, "It will never be possible to say with certainty that any individual did not see a spaceship, an enemy missile, or any other object." Buried deeper in that document, though, was a lengthy Air Force intelligence analysis report which speculated on the potential motives for interplanetary visitors, noting that such a civilization is obviously far more advanced than us, and even adding, "The acts of mankind most easily observed from a distance are atomic bomb explosions. We should expect some relation between the time of atomic bomb explosions, the time at which the spaceships are seen, and the time required for such ships to arrive from and return to their home base. Space travel outside the solar system is almost a certainty." This is a very interesting statement, especially considering the timeline of events. On July 16th of 1945, the first atomic bomb was tested at the Trinity testing site in New Mexico. August 6th, the United States deployed the first nuclear weapon on Hiroshima, Japan. 2 days later, they dropped the second in Nagasaki, Japan. The following year, on July 4th, would be the fourth nuclear detonation. 20 days later would be the fifth nuclear detonation. July of 1947 would be Kenneth Arnold's sighting, which would spark the United States' interest in UFOs. July 8th of that same year would be the infamous Roswell, New Mexico crash. Less than 2 months later would be Nathan Twining's memo, which would begin Project Sign, branch into studying UFOs that would evolve into Project Blue Book. Between January and October of 1948 would be the 3 big UFO sightings which Project Blue Book would classify as the classics. November 4th would be the United States Air Force's European division of the Scandinavian Ghost rockets, and in December of that year would be this very article in which the Air Force was responding to. 5 nuclear detonations, 4 major UFO sightings, and 2 inquiries by the United States Air Force into the matter. All of this took place within less than 3 years. Not only did the United States Air Force completely underestimate the impact that this article would have, and as a result get strong-armed into publicly contradicting their own stance on the issue, but they also seem to have used this as a template for their own disclosure statements 2 years later in that 1952 Marilyn Monroe issue of Life magazine, which we discussed in the last installment of this series. Donald Keyhoe would later compile all of the information in the True Life magazine and expand on it in a full-length novel with the same name, The Flying Saucers Are Real. This is how he ended up at General John A. Samford's press conference following the invasion of Washington.
Major Keyhoe, as author of the book Flying Saucers Are Real, what is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin. During a 3-year investigation, I found that many pilots have described objects of substance and high speed. One case, pilots reported their plane was buffeted by an object which passed them at 500 miles an hour. Obviously, this was a solid object, and I believe it was from outer space.
And although it was his first book, The Flying Saucers Are Real, which began his relationship with the United States military regarding UFOs, it would be his second book, Flying Saucers from Outer Space, which detailed his time doing so, and provided a behind-the-scenes account of that very press conference. The new Washington story broke with a bang in papers all over the country. Within 48 hours, newspaper editors from coast to coast were hammering at the Air Force in one demand for the truth. A typical editorial came from the Rocky Mountain News in Denver. It is incredible, as well as a terrifying thought, that our Air Force, with all of its facilities, hasn't been able to identify these objects. If these so-called saucers involve experiments cloaked by military secrecy, it is time to take off that cloak in the interest of national sanity. There are enough real dangers in the world without the unnecessary addition of imaginary ones. On the other hand, if they do not actually know what these objects are, then let there be no more boasting of our scientific and military advances until they do come up with the right answer. Even under the furious barrage from within and outside the Pentagon, General Samford still battled against any public discussion. But in the end, he had no choice. From somewhere higher up, General Samford was given an order. I have reliable evidence that it came from Lieutenant General Nathan Twining, now the Air Force Chief of Staff. Regardless of the source, Samford was told, in effect, you will hold a press conference. Lieutenant General Nathan Twining wasn't a guy to f*** with, and was the man personally responsible for the creation of Project Sign. 5 years earlier, in a report stating, it is in my opinion that the phenomena is something real and not visionary or fictitious. There are objects probably approximating the shape of a disc of such appreciable size as to appear as large as man-made aircraft. The report operating characteristics such as extreme rates of climbs, maneuverability, and motion, which must be considered evasive when sighted or contacted by friendly aircraft and radar, lend belief to the possibility that some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely. Not to mention, the Air Force had active orders out for its pilots to shoot down any unidentified flying objects that refused to land, which the press had already reported on, and had only added to the public hysteria. The president of the United States Rocket Society, Jen Ellen, was openly asking for the White House to cancel these orders, saying, "I respectfully suggest that no offensive action be taken against the objects reported as unidentified which have been sighted over our nation. Should they be extraterrestrial, such action might result in the gravest consequences, as well as possibly alienating us from beings of far superior powers. Friendly contact should be sought as long as possible." And the majority of the press was not only in the room, but had already reported on the invasion of Washington. And President Harry Truman was just as curious as everybody else, if not more so, because he saw the damn things flying over the White House.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction. We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States. Is that... We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any department of the United States. we can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States.
25 years later, Dr. J. Allen Hynek would give the following speech to the United Nations General Assembly. I am delighted to have been invited to speak on behalf of many of my scientific colleagues about the subject of unidentified flying objects. One of the smallest nations on Earth has courageously introduced the perplexing subject of UFOs to the General Assembly and thus made possible this meeting today. I commend the initiative Sir Eric Gary has taken. He has trod where mightier nations have feared to tread. There exists today a worldwide phenomena. Indeed, if it were not worldwide, I should not be addressing you and these representatives from many parts of the world. There exists a global phenomenon, the scope and extent of which is not generally recognized. It is a phenomenon so strange and foreign to our daily terrestrial mode of thought that it is frequently met by ridicule by persons and organizations unacquainted with the facts. Yet the phenomena persists. It has not faded away as many of us expected it would when years ago we regarded it as a passing fad or whimsy. Instead, it has touched on the lives of an increasing number of people around the world. I refer, of course, to the phenomena of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, which I should like to define here simply as an aerial or surface sighting or instrumental recording which remains unexplained by conventional methods even after competent examination by qualified persons. You will note that this definition says nothing about little green men from outer space or manifestations from spiritual realms. It simply states an operational definition. A cardinal mistake and a source of great confusion has been the almost universal substitution of an interpretation of the UFO phenomena for the phenomena itself. This is akin to having ascribed the aurora borealis to angelic communication before we understood the physics of solar wind. Nonetheless, it is in the popular mind the UFO phenomena is associated with the concept of extraterrestrial intelligence, and this might yet prove to be correct in some context. Surely it would be a huge joke on all of us should it develop that evidence for extraterrestrial intelligence was right under our noses all the time, while great effort was spent searching for it elsewhere. But I repeat and emphasize that the global phenomena of UFO reports, frequently made by highly responsible persons, is not yet understood, yet it is a phenomenon that has claimed the interest and attention of millions of people. In the United States alone, the Gallup poll has not only shown a remarkably high awareness on the part of the public on the UFO subject, but it indicates that 57% of the U.S. population, thus well over 100 million people, believe that UFOs are real and not a figment of imagination. This subject is truly in the minds of many people. Indeed, according to our records, UFO reports have been assembled from 133 different countries, as you have probably already noted from the material given to you. I must also emphasize here that were it so that these reports, albeit their global nature, were slowly generated by irresponsible and ignorant persons, I should not be here this morning. The facts are quite otherwise. UFO reports in significant numbers have been made by highly responsible people, astronauts, radar experts, military and commercial pilots, many of these officials being of governments, science, and even including astronomers. Much of the UFO data are hard, not necessary as that term would be used by the physicists, but certainly harder than much of the data used in the social sciences and practices of law. Perhaps the hardest data we possess so far are the so-called close encounters of the second kind, otherwise known as the physical trace cases. These are the cases in which it is reported that, with a UFO event, there appears to be physical evidence of the immediate presence of the UFO. This can take the form of immediate physical effects on either animate or inanimate matter, or on both. Thus, psychological effects on humans and animals and plants have been very reliably reported, as has the interference with electrical systems in the immediate vicinity and the appearance of disturbed regions on the ground, also in the immediate vicinity of the UFO event. Now over 1,300 physical trace cases are on record. Any phenomenon which touches the lives of so many people and which engenders puzzlement and even fear among them is therefore not only of potential scientific interest and significance, but also of sociological and political significance as well, especially since it carries with it as many implications of the existence of intelligences other than our own. I will confine my remarks, however, to the scientific aspects of the subject. Dr. Vallée will address himself more directly to the sociological and hence likewise political aspects of the phenomena. Speaking then for myself as an astronomer, and I believe for many of my colleagues as well, there is no longer any question in my mind of the importance of this subject. It is my considered opinion, based on many years of study, both as a scientific consultant to the United States Air Force and in recent years as an involved scientist, that the UFO phenomenon, whatever its origin may turn out to be, is eminently worth our study, and I am in no means alone in this opinion. There is today a growing community of scientists from many countries who have declared an interest, either privately or openly, in pursuing the challenges presented by the UFO problem and who are gathering and analyzing the relevant data. I am not, therefore, and I emphasize the not, asking that the United Nations organization create its own commission to conduct research into the UFO field. We are dealing here with an unexplained phenomena which has been reported so far from 133 nations and which has aroused the concern and often the fear of significant fractions of their populations. Virtually all 133 countries are member states of the United Nations. It is a phenomenon which therefore has great possible sociological and political implications as well as scientific potential. In conclusion, let me once again clearly state that it is my considered opinion as a scientist who has devoted many years to its study that the UFO phenomena is real and not the creation of disturbed minds, and that it has both grave and important implications for science and for the political and social well-being of the peoples of this earth. It is therefore, in my opinion, worthy of recognition by the United Nations and worthy of study as a phenomena. I distinguish sharply here, as do my colleagues, between any given theory of the UFO, such as, for example, that they originate in some specific solar system, which would put the cart before the horse. I have not always held the opinion that UFOs were worthy of serious scientific study. I began my work as a scientific consultant to the United States Air Force as an open skeptic, in the firm belief that they were dealing with a mental aberration and a public nuisance. Only in the face of stubborn facts and data similar to those studied by the French have I been forced to change my opinion. I recognize that an opinion, no matter on what insights or experience it is based, still does not constitute positive proof. The creation of a mechanism within the United Nations to facilitate the exchange and translation of UFO reports and studies made in various member nations will, I firmly believe, hasten the day when this opinion will be translated into firm scientific knowledge. The UFO phenomena, as studied by my colleagues and myself, speaks the action of some form of intelligence, but whence the intelligence springs, whether it is truly extraterrestrial or bespeaks a higher reality not yet recognized by science, or even if it be some way or another a strange psychic manifestation of our own intelligence, is merely the question. We seek your help in assisting scientists, and particularly those already associated with the many formal and informal investigative organizations around the world, by providing a clearinghouse procedure where the work already going on globally can be brought together in a serious, concentrated approach to this most outstanding challenge to current science. But as I said, that would be 25 years later in 1978, and that would be getting very, very ahead of ourselves.